Welcome to Audit the Audit, where we sort out the who and what and the right and wrong of police interactions. This episode covers community caretaking functions, traffic stops, and excessive force, and is brought to us by This Is a Public Services channel and the Citizen Newspapers channel. Be sure to check out the description below and give them the credit that they deserve. This will be another double feature episode, so be sure to stick around for our coverage of both of today's interactions. Before we dive into today's interaction, I want to give a big thanks to the sponsor of this episode, Incite. Have you ever gotten an email from a website you use or a game you play letting you know that they were hacked? If you haven't, then consider yourself lucky. According to the 2021 Annual Data Breach Report by the Identity Theft Resource Center, there were 68% more breaches in 2021 than the year before, and the number of major breaches occurring every year continues to grow. With this increase in data breaches also comes an increase in data brokers. Data brokers aggregate your personal information, including your name and aliases, social security number, login credentials, online activity, and much more, and sell it to the highest bidders. Thanks to legislative actions like the California Consumer Privacy Act, in several states you have the right to request that your data be deleted and prevented from being sold. However, as with any other legal matter, it can take weeks or even months to actually see any results. Incite is a web service that makes reclaiming your personal data simple and automated. Incite does all the hard work for you and submits deletion requests on your behalf to over 66 data brokers worldwide. All you have to do is sign up, enter your info, and Incite will take care of the rest. Right now, Incite is offering the first 100 members of the ATA community who click the link below and use code AUDIT a 60% discount on their Incite service. So, click the link in the description and claim your exclusive offer before it's too late. Thanks again to Incite for sponsoring this episode. On September 10th, 2024, the owner of This Is a Public Services YouTube channel, who goes by the name Phocian the Good, was driving in DeLand, Florida, when he was pulled over by Officer Rafael Amaya Alfonso of the DeLand Police Department. Mr. The Good recorded the encounter with his dash cam and later shared the footage on his YouTube channel.
How's it going, man? I'm Officer Alfonso with the DeLand Police Department.
What'd you pull me over for?
For a well-being check. That's all it is. I saw that once I got behind you, you keep turning off and then...
A well-being check, huh?
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure you're okay. You keep pulling off the road and coming back on the road and stuff, so I'm trying to see if you're having a medical emergency or anything like that, that's all.
You're pulling me over. You're stopping me from what I'm doing. Because you're concerned? Because...
Yes.
Did I commit a crime?
I said I'm just doing a well-being check on you.
Did I commit a traffic infraction?
No, I'm just doing a well-being check.
Is this what is your name?
Officer Alfonso with the DeLand Police Department.
Who's the other officer?
What is it?
Who's the other officer?
Officer Amat. He's right over there. Just doing a well-being check on you, man. You keep Do you have a supervisor on duty? I can get a supervisor.
I'd like a supervisor over here.
Officer Alfonso informs Mr. The Good that he stopped him to perform a quote-unquote well-being check because he had lawfully pulled over to the side of the road several times while he was driving. Now, while traffic stops generally must be supported by at least reasonable suspicion of a crime or traffic offense, police officers may detain drivers pursuant to a so-called community caretaking function under certain circumstances, even without reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. The term community caretaking function originates from the 1973 case of Caddy versus Dombrowski, where the Supreme Court recognized that law enforcement officers frequently engage in duties that involve protecting or assisting members of the public that are, now quoting, totally divorced from the detection, investigation, or acquisition of evidence relating to the violation of a criminal statute. Therefore, as the First District Court of Appeal of Florida explained in the 2011 case of Majors versus State, quote, under the community caretaking doctrine, an officer may stop a vehicle without reasonable suspicion of criminal activity if the stop is necessary for public safety and welfare. For example, the quote continues, an officer is permitted to stop a vehicle when it is being operated in an unusual manner, even though no traffic violation is suspected. The purpose of such a stop is to ascertain whether the driver of the vehicle is in need of assistance due to illness, tiredness, or impairment, and to protect the motoring public from harm. However, the court went on to clarify that, now quoting again, even a stop pursuant to an officer's community caretaking responsibilities must be based on specific articulable facts showing that the stop was necessary for the protection of the public. Now, although Officer Alonso claimed that he believed Mr. The Good might have needed assistance because he had pulled off the road several times while he was driving, this argument is not particularly compelling, particularly given the fact that Mr. The Good did not pull off the road at all during the several minutes of dashcam footage immediately preceding the stop. Additionally, although the 5th District Court of Appeal of Florida also determined in the 2005 case of State versus Rodriguez that, quote, a stop may be justified even in the absence of a traffic infraction when the vehicle is being operated in an unusual manner. In reaching this conclusion, the court relied on cases where the so-called unusual manner of operation created a legitimate concern for the safety of the public, such as crossing the fog line 3 times within 1 mile, weaving within the lane more than 5 times over a quarter-mile distance, and weaving within the lane and moving slower than the posted speed. Accordingly, while it is possible that a court could conclude a community caretaking traffic stop was justified in this situation, given the lack of evidence regarding a potential public safety concern, it seems unlikely that a reasonable court would do so.
Give me a minute. 5 off 11 to 10 up. Can you come to my traffic stop? He's requesting a supervisor. Yeah, it is. Alright, I have a supervisor coming in.
Is this something that you guys typically engage in?
What is it?
Is this something that you guys typically engage in?
We conduct well-being checks all the time whenever a car, if we see that a car is doing some type of maneuvers or anything like that.
What maneuver was it that you...
I just said that you kept pulling off and on onto the road and all.
How many times did I pull off the road?
It was a total of 2 times that you did that, so I was trying to check.
Is this the second time, the traffic stop?
No, the second time is when you pulled off into the Stetson field.
When was the first time?
The first time, it was by the potato patch, if you know where that is. That's right down there by the Dixie Lodge. I don't know if you're from the area.
Really?
Now,
is that on video?
It is, actually. My dash cam records up to a minute before anything happens.
Anything happens? So when did you start recording?
A minute before the
lights turned on? So I was in that Stetson lot for more than a minute.
But it still happened under my presence. I was just doing a well-being check. The supervisor's coming. Okay, he's gonna.
Well, I mean, you're the one that pulled me over. You've got me.
Well, you requested a supervisor.
Yeah, because you've got me over here on the side of the road.
Yeah, for a well-being check. That's what it was. Yeah,
so how long do you need to conduct your well-being check?
This was it, but you called the supervisor, so I'm just waiting on my.
Because you're illegally detaining me on the side of the road, sir.
I'm just doing a well-being check. I never said you're being detained or anything.
Sir, I'm not detained. There's lights on behind me. You pulled me over to the side of the road. How am I supposed to believe that I'm not being detained?
Like I said, my supervisor's on his way.
Officer Alfonso claims that Mr. The Good is not being detained, despite the fact that he pulled over the driver and activated the lights on his police vehicle. A plurality of the Supreme Court established in the 1980 case of United States versus Mendenhall that, quote, a person has been, quote unquote, seized within the meaning of the Fourth Amendment only if, in view of all of the circumstances surrounding the incident, a reasonable person would have believed that he was not free to leave. Accordingly, as the Supreme Court explained in the 1984 case of Berkemer versus McCarty, quote, a traffic stop significantly curtails the freedom of action of the driver and the passengers, if any, of the detained vehicle. Under the law of most states, it is a crime either to ignore a policeman's signal to stop one's car, or, once having stopped, to drive away without permission. Certainly, few motorists would feel free either to disobey a directive to pull over or to leave the scene of a traffic stop without being told they might do so. Partly for these reasons, the quote continues, we have long acknowledged that stopping an automobile and detaining its occupants constitute a seizure within the meaning of the Fourth Amendment, even though the purpose of the stop is limited and the resulting detention quite brief. However, it should be noted that an officer's activation of police lights does not automatically mean that the driver is being detained under Florida law. The Supreme Court of Florida held in the 2009 case of GM versus State of Florida that the activation of police lights alone did not always constitute a seizure, but rather that, now now quoting, "The activation of police lights is one important factor to be considered in a totality-based analysis as to whether a seizure has occurred. For instance, the court noted that the activation of police lights alone may not rise to the level of a seizure under circumstances where a motorist was already stopped on a public roadway and the officer activated his or her lights either to indicate to other motorists that a car was parked on the roadway or where the driver gave some indication that he or she might be in need of assistance. However, because it appears that Officer Alonso activated his police lights in order to signal to Mr. The Good that he needed to pull over, it is highly likely that a court would conclude that Mr. The Good had been detained."
Well, go ahead and talk to my supervisor. You would have been free to go now because I see that you're doing perfectly fine, but you called for my supervisor. That's why.
I'm concerned that you're pulling people over for not doing a goddamn thing wrong.
I got you. Well, my supervisor.
I'm concerned that you're detaining people on the side of the road for no good goddamn reason.
Well, we're just doing a well-being check on you. Like I said.
I'm not real concerned about your well-being checking me. You're pulling citizens over on the side of the road for their well-being? Is that what I'm to understand?
We can do that.
You can do that, huh?
Might be having a medical issue.
What kind of medical issue would somebody have pulling over on the side of the road?
Like I said, you pulled over more than once. I was trying to make sure you were okay.
I don't like to be followed by police.
Okay. It's a public roadway. I'm allowed to follow you if I wanted to.
Yep. And I guess you're allowed to illegally detain me too, huh?
I never said you were detained. I said,
Sir, I'm not detained. What do those lights mean?
you can leave right
Okay. When an officer pulls behind you, you rude mother. You see what's going on here? I got pulled over for a well-being check. They want to check my well-being. I got a supervisor coming here. All right, let me get back to this. They got a supervisor coming up here. Yeah, I'm good.
How's it going, man?
How do you think it's going? Is it Sergeant still, Sergeant Salmon?
It is.
Why are your officers pulling people over for no crime?
Okay, so he was conducting a well-being check on you. You were
Come on,
exhibiting
man.
some concerning
Concerning
driving.
behaviors,
Yeah, driving.
like pulling to the side of the road safely in a safe manner,
Okay. He said you did so several
not
times.
violating
You gonna
any
let me talk,
traffic
or you
infraction.
gonna- Okay.
You have me detained on the side of the
You're
road,
not
and you don't
detained
want to
anymore, you're
listen to
free to
me.
Sergeant!
Sorry about that, everybody. Yeah, I just got pulled over. Did you hear what he said? It was a well-being check. He pulled me over for my own well-being. And then I wouldn't stop talking. And since I wouldn't stop talking, that enraged the sergeant, and he could no longer listen to the person complaining. All right, we're gonna go to the PD. How about that? You guys want to go to the police department? We're going to go to the police department, and we're going to complain about this.
Mr. The Good has documented several attempts to file a complaint with the DeLand Police Department on his YouTube channel, but as of the date of writing this episode, it appears that he has not been able to do so. It is unclear whether Mr. The Good intends to pursue legal action in addition to his department complaint. Overall, Officer Alfonso gets an F for initiating a likely unconstitutional traffic stop, demonstrating a clear lack of knowledge regarding what constitutes a Fourth Amendment seizure, and attempting to justify his actions by claiming to be concerned for Mr. The Good's well-being. Sergeant Salmon also gets an F for maintaining an unprofessional demeanor throughout his brief encounter with Mr. The Good, blindly supporting Officer Alfonso's unconstitutional conduct, refusing to listen to Mr. The Good's concerns, and storming off in the middle of the conversation. The DeLand officer officers appeared to have prior knowledge of Mr. the Good and his activities as a quote-unquote independent citizen journalist, and it requires little imagination to infer that this familiarity may have been the true motivation for the stop, especially given the nonsensical nature of Officer Alfonso's explanation for the so-called well-being check. This encounter demonstrates how officers can sometimes attempt to legitimize unlawful actions by distorting their duty to protect the community, turning it into a pretext for conducting criminal investigations, or potentially even harassing citizens who call for accountability. Mr. the Good gets a B+, because although he did an excellent job advocating for his constitutional rights both during and after the stop, I cannot in good conscience give him an A because he got out of the vehicle during the traffic stop. Although he likely did not violate any laws by doing so, police officers are trained to view unexpected movements as potential threats, and when a citizen exits their vehicle during a traffic stop without being asked to do so, an officer could interpret this action as aggressive, potentially escalating the situation and putting the citizen in danger. And while I do not believe that drivers should have to fear for their lives if they get out of their vehicle to attempt to talk to an officer, given the current state of police-citizen affairs, it would have been safer for Mr. the Good to remain in his vehicle and file a complaint after the fact. Now, of course, this situation was different from a typical traffic stop, as Mr. the Good appeared to have a pre-existing relationship with the officers, and I understand why Mr. the Good wanted to try to continue the conversation after Sergeant Salmon stormed off. However, the safest course of action during a traffic stop is always for the driver to remain seated in the vehicle with their hands visible. Let's move on to the next interaction. On September 7th, 2024, officers with the Auburn Police Department responded to reports of juvenile suspects trespassing and attempting to break into cars in Auburn, New York. The interaction that followed was captured on officer body camera.
Come out of the bush right now. Get up now.
They were chasing me.
Get up. What are you doing?
They were chasing me.
What's your name?
They were chasing me.
No, because you're trying to break into cars.
We weren't.
You were in your neighbor's yard,
no,
trespassing in their backyard. She's got you on camera, dude.
Oh yeah, we did it that one time. They told us to stop and we stopped.
You've been cutting through yards. What the f*** are you doing?
We didn't break in no cars.
Okay, but you've been cutting through yards all through the city. This is the second or third time. Your mom's I'm going to arrest your mother. Because you want to around and do all this all times of night. Where's your mother right now?
I mean, it's not a trick question. Where's your mom?
It's not going to prevent her from getting arrested. I've already made up my mind. Where is your mother? What, you're cool enough to run around all the city, but you can't answer a simple question?
I don't even run around all the city.
You do.
I don't.
You do.
I don't.
Because last time you were cutting through yards, it was on North Division Street with your friends.
Yeah, because they live all the way down here.
So what are you doing cutting through yards there, too?
Because I'm with them. We're walking places. What do you mean?
Use the sidewalk. That's what they're for.
We literally haven't cut in the yard in like a couple weeks.
Just today you did. Your neighbor's yard. She doesn't want you in their yard.
When did we didn't cut in anyone's yard today.
You're on camera.
Not today. I don't remember going through anyone's yard.
Well, she said you were on there today. I saw a video and you were in the backyard, so.
I've been inside all day.
Until now? So
no,
you left?
I was all the way at the library
So you left?
earlier. No, I was all the way at the library earlier. 4 to like 9 or 10, and then I came home. And
so why are you in this bush now?
Because they were chasing me.
For what reason?
I don't know. They think we did something and we didn't.
All right, step right here. What's in the bush?
Nothing. That's not my bike. That was it.
I told him that well, him and his buddies were looking at people's cars, and it's been going on for a few weeks now. She said she got it on camera and stuff. And so I chased them around the block, and I was like, oh, listen, it's not what we're doing. My grandparents look at their parents' cars, they're looking in their cars. You know what I mean? Catch someone on
So it's not just one person saying it, dude.
Yeah.
What?
That you're looking through cars. And
It wasn't. I swear to God.
so what else are you doing out in the rain?
Because I'm hanging out.
With who? Where is everyone?
I don't know.
Everyone ran.
We all split. We didn't do anything.
Why would you split if you didn't do anything?
Because we were scared. They were chasing us.
People don't just chase people for no reason.
Because they thought we did something and we didn't.
But ironically, there's a random bike
I
where you're
swear
hiding.
to God, that's not mine.
Well, I know it's not yours. Did you take it from somewhere?
It's been there. I just got in this bush. I've never been in this bush before.
Can you just make sure you get his name if you didn't?
He got it all.
All right.
But, that's why I got
So who are the other two?
The other two?
Yeah.
My friends.
What's their names? If they're your friends, you know their names.
No, you not.
I didn't try to break in no car.
Alright, just right here.
If I ever catch you by my crib, I'm gonna smoke you. I promise you.
Alright, go. Hey, you're under arrest. Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back.
Oh, yeah, my crib.
Put your hands behind your back. Hey, put your hands behind your back. Look,
All right.
That was crazy.
Back up. All right, guys, back up.
Are you serious? That's a little bit too much.
He was given instructions. Put his hands behind his back. He's
You had
already
to slam him like that, bro. You picked him 6'5" feet in the air. Like what?
You have to do that, man.
He's 80 pounds, bro.
Ranger Auburn, can you send medical in custody?
While the officers are questioning the juvenile, area resident Diedrich Parks aggressively approaches the suspect and threatens to quote-unquote smoke him if he catches him near his quote-unquote crib. The officers put hands on Mr. Parks to attempt to hold him back from the juvenile, and Mr. Parks swats one of the officers' arms away. The officers then attempt to place Mr. Parks under arrest. Mr. Parks seems to resist commands to put his hands behind his back for handcuffing. The officers lift him up off the ground and then slam him onto the sidewalk when he apparently fails to comply, knocking him unconscious. We will discuss the officer's use of force later in this episode, but for now, we're going to focus on Mr. Parks's conduct. Under Section 240.26 of the New York Penal Law, quote, a person is guilty of harassment in the second degree when, with intent to harass, annoy, or alarm another person, he or she strikes, shoves, kicks, or otherwise subjects such other person to physical contact, or attempts or threatens to do the same. Now, in this instance, Mr. Parks threatened to smoke, typically meaning to kill or to seriously injure the juvenile if he were to come near his property. This is an example of a so-called conditional threat, which is a statement that expresses an intent to cause harm only under specific circumstances. In the 2017 case of People versus Swevemir, the criminal court for the city of New York in New York County held that an individual could be convicted of harassment for making a conditional threat, noting that, now quoting, while the use of the word conditional in the true threat cases is sometimes misleading and imprecise, it is clear that the occurrence of an upcoming event before the threat can be fulfilled will not, by itself, prevent its prosecution. It is only when the words convey a threat so remote, preposterous, or humanly impossible that they should be said on their face to be outside the potential realm of prosecution as true threats. Therefore, the fact that Mr. Parks's threat was conditional would not save him from a harassment conviction. However, in the 1989 case of People versus Dietz, the Court of Appeals of New York, which is the highest court in the state, overturned a conviction under this statute against an individual who threatened to, quote, beat the crap out of another individual, quote, someday or night in the street, noting that although genuine threats of physical harm fall within the scope of the harassment statute, an angry outburst without more does not. Similarly, in the 2022 case of People versus Logano, the Court of Appeals of New York determined that an individual could only be charged, now quoting, for a threatening statement that is serious, should reasonably have been taken to be serious, or was confirmed by other words or acts showing that it was anything more than a crude outburst. The court then went on to explain that, now quoting again, put another way, the statute criminalizes a so-called true threat, not mere angry words. A true threat is one that a reasonable person in the victim's position would consider to be an unequivocal statement of intended physical harm. Therefore, Mr. Parks could potentially defend himself against a harassment charge by arguing that his statement was an angry outburst rather than a true threat of intended physical harm. Still, it should be noted that even if Mr. Parks were acquitted under this or another defense, it is likely that a court would conclude that the officers had at least probable cause to arrest him for harassment. Section 205.30 of the New York Penal Law states that, quote, a person is guilty of resisting arrest when he intentionally prevents or attempts to prevent a police officer or peace officer from effecting an authorized arrest of himself or another person. Likewise, Section 195.05 of the Penal Law states that, quote, a person is guilty of obstructing governmental administration when such person intentionally obstructs, impairs, or perverts the administration of law or other governmental function, or prevents or attempts to prevent a public servant from performing an official function by means of intimidation, physical force, or interference. Accordingly, it is possible that a court could also find that Mr. Parks resisted arrest and obstructed the officers by pushing them away and struggling against handcuffing.
People be breaking into houses and like this.
If you want to custody,
Swear. Swear you are. This is face hit the, oh my god, yeah, D, are you alright, man? Come on,
Alright, man, just back up for me, please.
Oh my god. You need to call my man.
We just called for
did.
ambulance.
Yeah, that's
I hope your body cams are on, bro.
They are.
That's crazy.
yeah, that's wild.
Come on.
Excessive force of, yo.
Yeah.
See what all this shit caused?
He shouldn't be putting hands on us, though.
He didn't even.
He did. He did.
He did.
We put hands on
He
him.
did.
He
Alright?
put hands on him first. I understand the
No,
aggression.
we wanted him to
Like,
back
slam
up,
him
and then
away,
he's
but you
pushing
didn't have
our
to slam
hands.
him on his
Alright?
face to the concrete, knock him out.
Right.
He's out cold, man.
Yeah, that's crazy.
You don't think that's excessive at all?
Hey, next street, a little bit from my way.
What's that?
My wrist.
Oh my
What do you need?
God, I can't.
What's my wrist? My wrist.
It's in handcuffs right now.
Just that one thing.
Here, sit up for us.
Okay.
Knocked him clean the out, put a guy glass in his eye, his face, and all that. And sir, that was a clear pop and pick. You didn't have to pick him up over your head and slam him to his face. Hope you run those body cams, because that was crazy. I understand you had to de-escalate.
Okay, I understand that.
You gave him 2 times.
I understand you got
Yeah, 2 times too many. Do you understand that?
Okay, but he's putting hands on us at that point. So
He slapped hand away and said, "Let
Bring
go
this-
of me."
and then he pushed him. All right. All right. You need to step away. All right. All right.
We're done. We're done here. You can go to where you gotta go
These
to.
guys breaking into our cars.
And we were handling it.
You were
Okay.
handling it.
And he came up on us. All right.
You slammed and knocked the man
Okay,
on
can you
his
stand
face
up? Or no?
For nothing.
We'll help you up now.
You slapped his hand. He slapped your hand away. He started backing away. You grabbed him, said you're under arrest. Said it twice and slammed him on his face. Knocked his glasses into his face.
Is that
Knocked
We're
him clean
we're
out.
coming
You
in
barely
here.
speak English right now, man.
We're gonna sit over
That's
here.
insane.
The officers defend their use of force to the witnesses, arguing that the force was justified because Mr. Parks put his hands on them. As we have discussed before here on ATA, although officers have the authority to use some force in making an arrest, the use of so-called unreasonable or excessive force constitutes a violation of the Fourth Amendment. In the 1989 case of Graham versus Connor, the Supreme Court determined that excessive force claims must be evaluated based on what a reasonable officer would have done in the same situation, considering the facts and circumstances at the time, including the severity of the crime at issue, whether the suspect posed an immediate threat to the safety of the officers or others, and whether the suspect was actively resisting arrest or attempting to evade arrest by flight. Now, while Mr. Parks did appear to be struggling with the officers and touched one of the officers when he swatted his hand away, as the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York explained in the 2016 excessive force case of Zachary versus City of Newburgh, whether a citizen is resisting officer commands, now quoting, is not necessarily dispositive of whether the force used against him was unconstitutionally excessive. A law enforcement officer's use of force may be unreasonable, even if the arrestee is not yet subdued, if the officer uses overwhelming and disproportionate force in subduing the arrestee. Likewise, the same court stated in the 2011 case of McMillan versus City of New York that, quote, although the circumstances of an arrest may justify an officer in using some degree of force, an officer is not entitled to use an unlimited amount of force, even where the arrestee resists or assaults the officer. The force used by the officer must be reasonably related to the nature of the resistance and the force used, threatened, or reasonably perceived to be threatened against the officer. Well, given this precedent, Mr. Parks would have a strong argument that the officers used disproportionate force in response to his non-violent resistance, and that, therefore, lifting him up off the ground and slamming him onto a concrete sidewalk so hard that he lost consciousness constituted a constitutionally excessive use of force.
I'm almost fine now.
Hey, can you walk over to this car?
Yes, I can. Does it go if you ask me that or no?
What's that?
You got anything else on you, man?
No,
I was literally just asking if that was Gavin. He's my actual friend. I don't think he knows
Let him
he's
free, breaking into people's cars. Y'all are really in for a suit. Y'all are in for a suit. You're here thinking you're a good guy for it.
Just have a seat. Have a seat.
If that's his real problem is not against me. I just wanted to let that be cleared. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about him. His real problem is not with me.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, he wasn't.
Do we need
No, it's Aiden.
Yeah, sit in the car for us, right?
Just have a seat. We'll leave it cracked for you. Here, you want him to stand here for a second?
According to the Auburn Police Department, Mr. Parks was taken to department headquarters after his arrest, where he was checked by medical personnel. Mr. Parks was charged with harassment, obstructing governmental administration, and resisting arrest. And on September 23, 2024, he pled not guilty to all 3 offenses and was released on his own recognizance. As of the date of writing this episode, the charges are still pending. On September 24, 2024, the Auburn Police Department released the body camera footage from the encounter and issued a media release written by Chief James Slayton in order to, now quoting, dispel the false rumors circulating in the community. In explaining why the use of force was necessary, Chief Slayton wrote that, quote, the officer advised Parks that he was under arrest and to place his hands behind his back. Parks did not comply with the officer's attempt to arrest him. Commands were given for Parks to stop resisting and to place his hands behind his back. Parks continued to ignore all commands. At this time, Parks was taken to the ground and placed in handcuffs. Additionally, to summarize the use of force, Chief Slayton stated that, now quoting again, Parks was not lifted above the officer's head like previous statements made by individual witnesses, but his upper body was controlled by the officer. Parks was lifted off the ground to decentralize his balance, and Parks was taken to a platform where he could be controlled. Upon reaching the ground, the officers immediately knew something was wrong. Parks had hit his head on the concrete sidewalk and was unconscious. Although the release did not explicitly endorse the officer's actions, the tone of the release was one of approval, while minimizing the nature of the force used, and it made no mention of any disciplinary action against the officers. Overall, the Auburn officers get an F for using unnecessary and excessive physical force against an individual who was struggling against handcuffing, lifting a citizen off the ground and slamming him onto a concrete sidewalk with such force that it caused him to lose consciousness for 42 seconds, and then attempting to defend their actions by claiming that Mr. Parks put his hands on them, when all he had really done was push an officer's hand off of his chest and struggle against handcuffing. Now, while the officers certainly would have been justified in using some level of force against Mr. Parks, any reasonable person should know that violently slamming an individual's head onto concrete pavement poses a danger of serious and lasting injury. After Mr. Parks was knocked unconscious, the officers then seemed to try to blame Mr. Parks for his own injury, implying that he was engaged in violent behavior that may have posed a risk to them. This encounter demonstrates the all too common situation where officers use excessive force against a citizen who is not behaving perfectly, only to have the department attempt to vilify the victim of force in an attempt to justify the extreme level of force used against them, rather than just taking responsibility for the officer's misconduct. Mr. Parks also gets an F for threatening harm to a juvenile in front of police officers, physically resisting handcuffing, and potentially violating multiple criminal laws in the process. While Mr. Parks may not have been serious in his threat against the juvenile, I do agree with the officer's initial decision to intervene and attempt to prevent him from reaching the suspect, given his aggressive language and demeanor. However, while Mr. Parks' conduct gave the officers reason to use a lesser amount of force against him, I strongly believe that the force actually used against him was excessive. Mr. Parks' grade is in no way an endorsement of the Auburn officers' actions, and Mr. Parks certainly did not deserve to be subjected to the extreme level of violence that was inflicted upon him. However, due to the aggressive, non-compliant, and potentially criminal nature of his conduct, I have no choice but to also assign him a failing grade. Let us know if there is an interaction or legal topic that you would like us to discuss in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out my second channel for even more police interaction content.